The morning I went hunting for meat began like 100 others, with frost clinging to the grass and the sky pale as old bone. Winter had come early that year, and the hills were quiet in a way that made a man feel watched even when he was alone. I took my rifle and my pack and told myself I'd be back by dusk with a deer slung over my shoulders. The ranch needed food, and I needed the comfort of doing something simple and familiar. Hunting was honest work. You tracked, you waited, you respected the land, and if you were lucky, you ate. The trail I followed cut deep into a stretch of country most folks avoided. Old stories clung to those ridges, stories of skirmishes, broken treaties, and people who never quite left even after they were gone. I never put much stock in talk like that, but I'll admit the air felt heavier the farther I walked. The forest grew denser, the light thinner, and sounds carried in strange ways. A snapped twig echoed like a rifle crack. A bird's cry sounded almost human. I found the first tracks near a creek, not deer but something lighter, barefoot impressions pressed into the mud. They were fresh, that alone stopped me cold. No one traveled barefoot in that cold unless something was very wrong. I knelt, touched the edge of one print, and felt the chill seep into my fingers. Whatever had made them had been here recently. I followed those tracks instead of the game trail, though I couldn't have said why. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe the sense that the hunt I'd planned was no longer the hunt I was on. The prints led uphill, away from water, into rough ground where scrub and stone fought for space. More than once I thought I heard breathing that wasn't my own, ragged and shallow, carried on the wind. I found her near a stand of juniper, half collapsed against a rock, as if the earth itself was holding her upright. At first I thought she was dead. Her skin was smeared with dirt and ash, her dark hair tangled and stiff with dried blood. She wore nothing but a torn scrap of hide around one wrist, some remnant of something that had once been more. The cold should have killed her. The exposure should have ended it. Yet her chest rose and fell barely, stubbornly. She was Apache, that much was clear even through the grime and exhaustion. Her face was strong, boned, her features set in lines that spoke of pain endured rather than fear. She looked older than a girl, younger than an elder, an adult worn down by something relentless. There was nothing provocative in her nakedness, nothing inviting. It was the nakedness of survival stripped to its last layer, of a human being reduced to breathe and will. I froze, rifle forgotten at my side. I'd grown up hearing about Apaches as if they were ghosts or monsters, never as people you might find dying in the cold. All the stories I'd been told had never prepared me for the simple truth of her lying there, vulnerable and alone. She opened her eyes when I shifted my weight. They were dark and sharp, even through the haze of fever. For a moment we stared at each other, two animals caught between flight and fight. Then she tried to move, failed, and a sound escaped her that made my chest tighten. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of someone who had already screamed too much. I raised my hands slowly, showing I meant no harm, though I didn't know if the gesture meant anything to her. I spoke softly, words tumbling out uselessly in English. She didn't understand, or if she did, she didn't respond. Her gaze flicked to the rifle and back to my face, measuring. I took off my coat. The cold bit instantly through my shirt, but I ignored it. Moving carefully, I draped the coat over her shoulders, keeping my motions slow, deliberate. She flinched when the fabric touched her skin, then clutched it weakly, fingers curling into the wool like it was the last solid thing in the world. There was no question then about what I had to do. I couldn't leave her. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen her. The hunt for meat was over, replaced by something heavier and far more dangerous. Helping her could bring trouble from the weather, from her people if they misunderstood, from my own if they found out. But none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that she would die if I walked away. Getting her back to my cabin was the hardest thing I'd done in years. She was light, frighteningly so, and every step jarred her thin frame. I wrapped her as best I could, using my blanket, my spare shirt, anything to keep the cold off her skin. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words I didn't understand. Once, she gripped my arm with surprising strength, nails biting into flesh, and stared at me like she was trying to memorize my face. The sky had darkened by the time I reached the cabin. I kicked the door open and laid her near the hearth, stoking the fire until the room filled with warmth. I'd never been so aware of my own clumsiness. I fetched water, heated it, cleaned her wounds as gently as I could. There were cuts and bruises, signs of a long, brutal journey. No fresh bullet wounds, no obvious breaks, just the cumulative damage of being hunted by hunger, cold, and perhaps men. I turned my back while she slept, giving her privacy even in her unconsciousness. When she woke later, it was with a knife in her hand, one I hadn't realized I'd left within reach. She pointed it at me, eyes blazing despite her weakness. I stopped where I was, heart pounding, and slowly sat on the floor, putting distance between us. We stayed like that for a long time, fire crackling, the wind howling outside. Finally, her arm shook, and the knife clattered to the floor. She sagged back against the wall, exhaustion reclaiming her. I slid the blade away and left it where she could see it, not hidden, not threatening. The days that followed blurred together. She recovered slowly, strength returning in cautious increments. I gave her clothes simple and loose, and she accepted them without ceremony. We communicated with gestures at first, then with a few shared words learned and traded like precious things. Her name was Atsa. She didn't tell me everything, but I learned enough. Her band had scattered after an attack, whether by soldiers or rivals she never made clear. She had been captured briefly, escaped, and run until there was nowhere left to run. She never asked why I helped her, and I never asked why she trusted me enough to stay. Trust grew in the small spaces between words, in shared meals, in the way she watched the tree line at dusk, and I stood beside her without asking. There was no romance in it, no soft focus or easy comfort. There was respect, hard, earned and fragile. Word travels fast in lonely places. Tracks appear, eyes watch from a distance. One morning I woke to find shapes on the ridge, silhouettes against the rising sun. Apache warriors, a dozen at least, moving with the confidence of people on their own land. Atsa stood beside me, calm in a way that surprised me. She touched my arm once, a brief, grounding contact, then stepped forward into the open. I didn't know what would happen. I only knew I wouldn't run. The leader approached, eyes flicking to me, to the cabin, to Atsa. They spoke in their language, voices low and intense. I caught nothing of the meaning, only the emotion beneath it. At last the leader nodded once, sharply. Atsa turned to me. She said a few words I understood now. She said thank you. She said she would remember. Then she walked away with her people, back into the land that had nearly killed her and yet still claimed her. I stood there long after they were gone, the cold seeping back into my bones. I'd gone hunting for meat and brought home a reminder instead, a reminder that survival isn't always about what you take, but about what you refuse to leave behind.